should say Russ of Aquarimax Pets here with some of my snakes. I see Javi Strange Pets, Canalside Exotics, Round 1, I think Wendy Hickson, Victor Olson, Michael Hare, Brandon Gatewood, let's see who else, Dana Reed, Random T, Kevin Zay, Mantis God, Charlie McLaughlin. Excellent. I may have missed some. Hopefully I did not. Switching it over to live chat so we'll get more people in there. Oh, they already knocked leaves into their water dish. Or I may have done that. Full disclosure, when I was, right before the stream, added some fresh leaf litter to the enclosure. Probably did that myself. Stephen or Stefan, I can't remember if it's Stephen or Stefan Sager, Bry and Schonmeister. Hey, welcome. You can see Ruby here. Check her out. She is pretty chubby. Oh, sorry. She's feeling a little sassy, I guess, maybe because she's feeling so chubby. Look how chubby she is. But she's doing all right. I think she's going to shed soon. This may be her pre-birth shed. They'll often shed a week or so before they give birth. Not always, but they often will, and it's about time. I mean, it's pretty close. So her eyes were blue a couple days ago, and they've cleared up again. So it could be very soon when she does that. You can see some scale spread. I don't know if you can see the scale spread here, but there's a lot of scale spread, and she's just really chubby, and she feels jelly-like, which is a sign that there's babies. Just being a little bit lumpy. And so I can't see the chat very well from here, but I hope you guys can at least see the snakes, and I'm going to come back and see if I can catch up on the chat. So Charlie, my favorite animal in your collection, if you have one, of course. I don't really have a favorite animal, but sometimes I think if I had to give them all up except for one species or one taxon, because it would be really hard to choose a species. Whoa, my goodness, Ruby. She's heavy. I might have to reevaluate how that's supported, because she just tipped it a little bit, which is crazy, but she is too. It might be snakes. Let's see. It might actually be snakes if I had to pick one taxon. And oh, thank you, Kevin. I think they're looking pretty fantastic, if I do say so myself. Houdini here just shed today. This one. He's usually the one that has more of a yellow stripe among the males. Between the two males, he has the yellower stripe and a little less red than Rufus does. Rufus has kind of a duller stripe, but he has more red in his markings. And you really can't see Ruby's red markings all that much right now because she's about to shed, and it's pretty dull right now. But let's see what we got. All right, let's take a look. Okay, so okay, Stephen, you got the powder oranges and all's doing well. I'm not sure what's going on with the mailbox. I'm really confused about it, because some people are telling me that it's full, but then I'm getting emails from other people, so I'm not sure what's going on, why some people can get through and some people can't. But I will go and check and make sure it's not full, but I'm glad the powder oranges are doing well. So Javi Strange Pets, you can't keep garters in New York City? That's crummy. I didn't realize that. I knew they had some interesting laws about exotics, to put it mildly, but I didn't know you couldn't keep garters. So London Jade, my little garter brothers have gone on a bit of an eating hiatus. Any tips? They're 9-ish months old, Eastern checkered. Okay. Did they brumate at 9-ish months old? May very well be that you did not have them brumate this past winter. Let me know. That will give me an idea of what to tell you next about what to do. Let's see. Sandy Sizemore here. Awesome. Round 1 here. Frank de Tank. Random tea? Would love a communal with garters and or garters or decays. Yeah. Yeah. My vote goes with garters. I like decays a lot, but garters are just so hard to beat. I've watched Snake Discovery with her little group of decays. They're hard to find captive bred, but that may change if she gets hers to breed. I don't know. I haven't looked up on that. Haven't checked up on it in a while. But they're hard to find captive bred. Garters are pretty easy to find captive bred these days. But garters are also very personable, as you can see. Even when they're full and don't want to eat, like I'll try to get food and they refuse it, they still want to come out and say hi to me. They still want to climb up my arm and do this business that they're doing right now. Now, right now, they are hungry, so I'm not going to try to do any sort of deception there. They're hungry right now, but they'll do this even when they're not. So, she really does feel like a bowl full of jelly. So, she's got to be very gravid. I think she actually mated successfully. I mean, I saw at least one lockup and tons of courtship. The lighting is kind of crummy, unless I get closer in, isn't it? Should I get closer in with the camera? Would that be good? A little bit closer in. Should I try it? Get some better lighting on these folks here. Anyway, as I was saying, I think she probably mated successfully right around the February 23rd-ish, right in there. So, Stephen, what's the feeding routine like for a garter? Well, it kind of depends on what you're feeding them and so on, but I feed 2 to 1, and now they're all over here. They're all out of the way. They're inside this part of the enclosure here, doing their thing over here. How can I? I want you to be able to see them. It's more interesting, right? Maybe I'll just zoom out just a little bit on part of the enclosure. You can see, you can't see all the enclosure, but you can see more of it this way. So that works. Sorry, I lost where I was. Feeding routine for a garter. Yes. Like I said, it depends on what you're feeding them and so on. Their staple diet, for mine, is mice of appropriate sizes. So I can get by feeding them twice to 3 times, usually twice a week to 3 times a week. And it depends. Like I think this time it does vary a little bit. This time it's been almost a week since I fed them. Maybe it's been a week since I fed them. But that's not normal. I usually feed them twice a week. Ruby, she's a lot bigger than the boys. She gets 2, depending on where you get them from, they're called medium or adult mice. They are adult mice, and they're not the extra large like the retired breeder mice, but she could probably handle those, to be honest. She gets 2 of the adult or medium mice at every meal. So usually twice a week. Sometimes gets a couple extra pinkies and an earthworm or something for dessert. She loves earthworms, and I give them earthworms, for variety and whatnot. So that's about how I do it. If you're giving them mostly things like worms and fish, they'll need to eat a little bit more often, maybe 3 times a week. And it also depends on how big the meals are. Generally, they don't like. They do better with smaller meals more frequently than bigger meals less frequently compared to other snakes. But still, my corn snake eats twice a month, and these guys will eat about twice a week. So that is smaller and more frequent meals. They just do better also. And rather than giving her one big like jumbo mouse, extra large, it's better to give her 2, of the medium adults. So. Because they just do better. And these guys usually get fuzzies. They'll usually take 1 to 2 fuzzies, sometimes 3, depending on how they feel and whether or not they're interested in mating, which they're not now because she's been pregnant for a while. That's one of the ways you know that they're pregnant, is because the males pretty much lose interest once they are, which is kind of cool. So London Jade, if you didn't brumate them over winter, that might be part of the deal. Sometimes what you can do a mini brumation, since you've just got 2 males. You don't have to worry about breeding or anything, and you don't, that's not a concern. You could put them, don't feed them for a week or so, or 2, and since they're not eating, from the time time they stopped eating, make sure that they haven't had any food, but they've had normal metabolic temperature that they need to, thermoregulate and digest anything and pass anything that they had eaten. So maybe give them 2 weeks from the time they last ate at their normal temperatures. And then turn off their basking light and let their temperatures go down to room temperature or so for maybe a week. And then bring the temperature back up and wait a few days and then offer them some food. Sometimes that can get them going. Or sometimes offering something that they really like. What is their normal diet for your particular snakes? I find earthworms are one of the best foods for them. Kevin, yeah, some pond and stone foam would probably work really well. Last season, before they came out of brumation, I didn't have to worry about it, but she's gotten bigger. I think. I did think they grew during brumation, but she seems to be a lot bigger than she was most of last year. I guess she grew quite a bit after she gave birth. She made up for lost time and lost energy and just ate and ate and ate. Got a bit bigger. So there we go. That's probably part of what's going on. But I like that idea. I may do that. Let's see. Trying to catch up here. They're so friendly. How do you get them like that? Well, these were all captive bred babies. Teeny little captive bred babies that I got from Don's garter snakes. Like the size of a mechanical pencil-ish. Pretty small. I don't know exactly. I can't remember exactly. But too small to take a pinky mouse for sure. They were really tiny. They were about a month old. And I began handling them, hand feeding them and everything from that time. And they've responded really well to it. Another thing to keep in mind is that this particular subspecies, Thamnophis sertalis parietalis, is pretty docile. It's just a docile snake. And not that garters can't learn, you can tame down almost any garter of any species or subspecies, but these just seem to come a little bit more like that. Not that they're all like this or that my handling didn't do anything, but they kind of come preloaded with friendliness to some degree. So having strange pets, that can be a problem when they jump in the food dish. What you probably want to do if the food gets encrusted on the gecko's toes is put them in a hydration chamber so that the food gets all soft. Put like a damp paper towel in the bottom of a deli cup, a ventilated deli cup, and then let him sit in there for a little while and then spray his feet off a little bit gently with a spray bottle. See if you can get that crested gecko daggett off. That often helps. Hopefully it sounds like someone said Charlie said I glitched out. Did anybody miss what I was saying? And Theropod Hunter, have I kept a Celis aquaticus? I kept a species of freshwater aquatic isopod when I was a kid. That was the first isopod I actually kept inbred. I don't know what it was called because I was, that was like 13 years old, and this was before Bug Guide or iNaturalist or anything. And you're knocking leaves in your dish again. But I don't know what it was. It could have been a Celis aquaticus because I've heard that's been introduced here, but it might be another species, not so sure. So Kim, yeah, I think you have good taste if you want some garters. I love these snakes. They're so fun that they're communal, diurnal, super active, super friendly, not too big. I mean, they're beautiful. The benefits go on and on. And these are so great for outreach programs. I always bring a garter to my outreach programs, and people love them. So I should make an announcement for Kim and others who might be interested in getting garters. Ruby's babies, which are going to be born, probably within this month of April, will be for sale. There's a waiting list, and the waiting list has about 5 garters spoken for, if I remember correctly. Only about 5 of them. I'm probably going to get somewhere around 30 this time. So if you're interested in getting on the waiting list, all you have to do is email me And in the email, you tell me how many garters you want. It is best if you get 2 or more for the garters, unless you already have other garters and you're going to be keeping it with other garters and that's something else. You should also either you can do a same-sex group, pair or trio, or more of them. But if you do same-sex, then you don't have to worry about breeding. But if you're interested in breeding, obviously you can get a male and a female. Or if you're going to keep, you could get 2 males and 2 females and keep them in separate enclosures. You've got options. Just bear in mind that if you are going to get, and this relates to a Patreon question that someone had. I'm going to actually look it up and answer it more thoroughly. But if you get garters and you have a male and you have a female, even if you do not put them into brumation for the winter, it is likely that they will breed. The brumation makes the breeding more likely, and it makes the kind of primes their bodies for breeding, so you're more likely to get a bigger clutch of babies and stuff like that. But they will breed very frequently without any sort of cooling period or brumation. So if you're going to get some and you're not interested in breeding, please either keep a couple of males together, or a couple of females together, or a larger group of the same sex together, so that they can have buddies, because they really like buddies. But it doesn't have to be they don't have to be put into brumation to get there. So and I'm gonna, the official question, Sandy said it in the chat. Yeah, the official question came from Sandy. She said, I understand they live in colonies. Would they for sure breed? And the answer is almost certainly. Can't 100% guarantee they will breed. Sometimes you get infertility in garter snakes and whatnot, but in general, if they're kept together, they're going to breed. So yes. And Sandy had some more information in her question too. She said, are garters like these good for first-time snake owners? Absolutely. Garter snakes are a great first-time snake. I can't say that they're the best necessarily, but you'd have to give me a pretty compelling argument for a better one. But just keep in mind that they eat a little more frequently than most snakes do, so there's that. They're usually really good eaters. They're not that likely to go on a hunger strike. They may be a little picky about what they eat, so you have to be careful with that, but they're going to eat. And you may have to train them to eat certain foods or whatever, but they have hearty appetites, but they don't need a lot of space. Like with a couple of male garters, you could keep them in the equivalent of a 20-gallon aquarium, that size, and they would be okay in there, because they don't get very big if you go with males. If you go with females, 20 gallons kind of pushing it. It's probably too small. But you could do a 40-gallon and do like I do. I have a trio and a 40-gallon. They do great. So they're also good because if you don't want to feed mice, some people don't want to feed mice at all. That's a total repugnant idea to some people, and I can respect that. If you don't want to feed them mice, garter snakes are a great option, because they don't necessarily need to eat mice to thrive. They can live on a diet of things like earthworms with some supplementation. You can actually keep them solely on a diet of earthworms with supplementation of calcium and key vitamins and whatnot. You just get a calcium and vitamin mineral supplement, and you alternate them. Maybe do a feeding with a calcium supplement, a feeding with a vitamin supplement, and then a feeding with no supplementation, and just go through that rotation, and they'd be okay. But it's better to give them more variety. Other things you can feed them, there are thiaminase-free fish that you can give them, or at least fish that are low enough in thiaminase that the thiaminase doesn't cause a problem, like tilapia. You can give them tilapia fillets, once again, with supplementation. There are other fish. There's a type of smelt you can get for them, silver size, I think it is. There are others. Some people raise fish like guppies and platies to feed to them. Those are safe as far as thiaminase goes. Goldfish do not make a good steady diet for them, but healthy goldfish or rosy red minnows, the feeder minnows that you'll find at pet stores, both of those are good occasional foods. They're not good sole foods because they do have thiaminase in them, and that will cause them to get a thiamine deficiency that will eventually kill them unless it is addressed. So there's that. But I've given mine endlers, which are basically guppies, to get them started, get the picky eaters started. I fed them endlers. I did have a couple, maybe 3 snakes, I think it was, that never really transitioned. They would eat earthworms and endlers. They would not eat mice. All the rest of the babies transitioned over to mice from my last clutch. Ruby's last clutch. So hopefully that helps. Sandy, great question. You always have great questions, so I appreciate that. Some other questions in the Patreon. So Jadex just says, "Eek, so exciting!" And I totally agree. So I appreciate the enthusiasm there, but not really a question. But I appreciate your contribution of enthusiasm. Sherry Edwards, she adopted some of my babies last time. Actually, 2 groups of babies. I don't remember the exact number, Sherry, but you adopted some of my babies, and they're doing well. I remember you told me not too long ago. Says, does Ruby look bigger than she did last year? It'll be interesting to see how many she had. I think so. I think she's looking a little wider than she did last year. And she is just, look at her just chilling. She is not as active as she usually is, so I wonder if she's starting to feel this pregnancy. Garters seem to do that. I think she's going to have more. My prediction is she's going to have 30 or more. Last time she had 22. One was stillborn. But the other 21 were perfectly fine, and I didn't find any other slugs or stillborns. And it was a fully formed. It wasn't a slug. It was fully formed. Just didn't make it. It was still coiled up when I found it. Let's see. Rocky says, been wanting to keep a small clutch, maybe 4 or 5 siblings of garters for some time now, so I'd love to hear from you before I dive in. So I think I probably covered some of the questions you might have had already, Rocky. But yeah, a group of 4 or 5 siblings would be a barrel of fun. But just make sure that if you're not interested in breeding, you get all of the same sex. So yeah, he asked about that too. If it'd be better off just getting a group of all of one sex. Yeah. So I would highly advise that unless you're really into the breeding thing. Because there's a lot of garters. It's a lot of work for snakes to some degree. I mean, you can keep the babies together once you can get them sexed and then keep a group in one bin, a group in another bin. It's not super hard. You can feed them communally to some extent. You have to be careful. But you have to mince up the food so they don't end up grabbing, each grabbing a piece of food. The food has to be small enough that they just grab a mouthful and swallow it. So otherwise they can end up accidentally swallowing each other. So hopefully that helps. I think those are all the Patreon questions about this topic. So we'll go back to the chat. Oh my goodness. Rufus. Nope, that's not Rufus. That's Houdini. He just took a dive right onto the floor, but I just picked him up, so he's good. Let's see. So Sarah Yendry, yeah, she adopted 2 of Ruby's first clutch. They're doing great. Excellent to hear that. Did you get males or females, Sarah? I don't remember. And Sandy, I'd like to have a group of them, but not sure I want babies. Yeah, then, yeah, definitely get just the same sex. Do garters end up with issues from inbreeding? I'm sure eventually they would, but it probably takes quite a while, a lot of generations, and some bad recessive genes, So it's not necessarily something you have to worry about right away, but generation after generation you definitely would. And with these, I'm not actually sure which ones are siblings, because I loosely refer to these as siblings, because I got them from Don, but he actually had 2 clutches at about the same time of this subspecies, and he kept the clutches together, so we're not sure which ones are which. And so I have my suspicions that Ruby and Rufus are siblings just based on their appearance, and maybe Houdini's not, but hard to say. And yeah, but you would eventually have to worry about it. With inbreeding, but just over a few generations, probably not so much. And Sandy, yes, living in a colony is one of the cool things about them. Totally agreed. I love colony creatures. I love anything that's communal is automatically fascinating to me for the very fact that they're able to live together and get along and often seem to prefer it, like garters. Okay, she's acting a little bit defensive, so I'm going to stop putting her there. Not like she was striking at me or anything, but she didn't look the most comfortable, so I'm going to stop that. A lot of times she seems to actually enjoy being scratched, but right now she's not into it. So, What are your thoughts about tank dimensions for a trio, Stephen? I would say go with a 40-gallon if they are, if you have at least, if they're females or you have at least one female in there. If you have males, you could do a 20-gallon long, but I would go bigger. They will use all the space, and I would just say a trio in general, 40-gallon or bigger is pretty good. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And so do a group of males not fight? No, they don't. They're very good. They might, the thing you have to worry about, and I should qualify when I say they don't fight. Sorry, buddy. I kind of dropped you a little bit. Didn't mean that. When I say they don't fight, what I should mean is they don't just have fights for the sake of territory. They don't have fights for the sake of the female. They might push each other around a little bit. Sometimes they'll push each other off the basking site and whatnot, but they don't fight and cause any damage to each other, except when they're eating. When they're eating, you have to be super careful. You either need to feed them in separate enclosures, or you need to be just exceedingly careful to keep them away from each other while you're feeding them, because they will grab food at the same time. I don't really call that fighting, but they will, they can kill each other that way. I've had some close calls, and so I try to be really, really careful. I either feed, I'll take a snake out, feed it, or I'll just watch, and I'll have the tongs there ready to push other snakes away while one's eating, or I'll make sure they all get food at the same time, so they're all swallowing at the same time. I take precautions and make sure they're not going to hurt each other. But other than that, they don't fight. Vocabulous, good to see you as well. Josh with ISO Buddies was wondering where you were yesterday, was a little worried that there might be a problem, but it's good to see that you're okay. Says, let's see. I just lost the chat. Where'd it go? Do you give your garters UVB? I do. And it's a little bit crazy. It's probably going to be super hard to see, but let me see if I can get you there. I have to be super careful right now because the garters can just basically leap out if I'm not careful. So I'm going to try to show you what's going on here. I've got, there's some container for night crawlers there. Here are the two light domes. The one on the left is their basking light. The one on the right is a UVB light from VivTech. It's one of their, I think it's their second level, like not the highest degree of UVB. It's the next one down. I can't remember what it's called right now, but it's a VivTech bulb, which is an awesome bulb. It's LED and produces UVB in a safe form, and it lasts 4 years without any appreciable decrease in the UVB output, which is awesome. They're a little bit pricier than other UVB bulbs, but in the terms of just the one-time purchase, but in the terms of the amount of UVB you get out of them, it's actually much cheaper. And I got this one to start out as soon as my garters woke up this year in February. I think I put it on a few days before they came out of brumation to get ready, but I'm really excited about this bulb, this UVB bulb from VivTech. I actually did a live stream with VivTech, and that kind of convinced me to do it. I was already excited about doing it, but that helped me pull the trigger. Okay. So yeah, Random Tea, some of the fish they shouldn't eat. And I think, to be honest, Random Tea, that it's sort of, to say that they should never eat any of these fish might be a little bit on the, over careful side, but not that that's bad. It's just, you can give them healthy goldfish. I wouldn't go to the store and get feeder goldfish and feed them to them ever, because the feeders goldfish in the store are usually not very healthy, and they could possibly pass on diseases or something to them. So yeah, I would never feed them fresh from the store feeder goldfish. I never feed mine goldfish anyway, but if I were going to do it, I would either get some of those fish and kind of nurse them back to health and make sure they weren't carrying parasites and whatnot, and then feed them, but I wouldn't do it often, and I never feed goldfish, like I said, because they do contain that the thiaminase, which is bad for them. So those are fish that you should avoid feeding frequently. Let's see. I just missed another one I wanted to catch up on. Are they semi-aquatic snakes? Most garters are pretty good swimmers, and a lot of them, some are more semi-aquatic than others. Some spend a lot of time right up near the water and will catch a lot of their food in the water. Others are less so. I think this particular species, I'm not quite sure what they do in the wild, but most garters, if you give them a pool, they will use it and they will catch fish out of it. And I have done that with my baby garters. I put Endler's live bearers in a little dish in their tank and they will catch it. They will catch the fish pretty well. So I would say they all have at least some tendencies to succeed in water. So I'm sorry I'm so behind. There's a lot of chat that I wanted to catch up on. But if I miss something, don't feel bad about repeating it. Bicavia says, I have heard lots of good things about Reptilinks, but I'm hesitant to jump in because of the cost. Does anyone have experience with them, and is it worth it? I have used Reptilinks rather extensively. I like them, and if you don't want to feed mice, then yes, they're worth it. I think so. If you're not into feeding rodents, you have compelling arguments against feeding rodents for whatever reason, just personal preference, whatever, then yes, use them. My garters like them. My corn snake likes them. This is the only reason, really. Well, there's two reasons, I guess, that I'm not really feeding Reptilinks. One is because at the moment, I mean, I have done it successfully and I like them, and I may buy some more at some point. But the only reason I'm not feeding them right now, Reptilinks, is because when our corn snake ate Reptilinks, he would eat them, didn't seem super excited about them, and the difference in the feeding response when offered a Reptilink as opposed to a mouse, snakes seem so much more interested in eating the mouse. To be honest, the garters did not seem to care. The garters were totally happy to eat Reptilinks, and I would probably be feeding them Reptilinks. It's cheaper to buy a ton of pinky mice or fuzzy mice or whatever, and that's why I have not purchased any recently. I probably will again at some point. I think they worked well. And let's see. So garters, can they do well with live plants? They can, but what I noticed is I had some plants doing really well in here, and then I had to dig them up because of the babies, because the babies were getting down into the plant roots and stuff. And so I'm debating over whether to really plant this enclosure again or not. I have one little fern in a pot that's kind of struggling because when I pulled it up, it didn't like it. And I'm thinking about it. What I might do is just, when Ruby is getting really close, I might put her in a maternity enclosure, temporary maternity enclosure, so she gives birth in there and I don't have to worry about fishing dozens of little baby garter snakes out of the plants. So Dawn, you had a question about the isopods in a garter tank, a garter enclosure, because they will drown themselves. Yes, they will. So what I try to do, and I'm just noticing that when I put the water dish, and filled the water dish a little while ago and put it back in here, I put it too close to the cork bark. So if you have one that's high enough and far enough away from other stuff that the snakes can't, the isopods can't climb up and get in the water dish, you're probably good. But if I were to put this up against this cork bark, I know I'd get some drowning. That is my best answer that I've discovered so far. Just make sure they can't climb up into that dish, make it high enough, and keep it away from surfaces that they can climb, and that seems to do the trick. Sorry, Don, it took me so long to get to your message. That was one of the ones that I wanted to answer, was trying to answer before. How hard is it to sex baby garters? Well, I have a video on that from about little less than a year ago. Was it June, I want to say, when I released that? Dawn of Dawn's Garter Snakes taught me how to do it. So this year, I'll probably be sexing my own. It's not that hard, pretty easy. You just pop them, as they say, which means that you put a little bit of pressure, and this only works on babies. You don't want to do this on an adult necessarily. You put a little pressure on this spot right here. Well, it moved too fast for me to make any sense of that. But basically on the proximal end of the cloaca, the end towards the body of the cloaca, you put a little bit of pressure there. And if it's a male, the hemipenes will evert. They'll stick out. If it's a female, it won't happen. And that's how you do it. But you could check out that video, and that would be helpful too. Ying, how do you control your humidity? Mine always goes too high or too low. To be honest, what I focus on is trying to provide a humidity gradient. So over by this water dish and under this cork bark, there's a lot of sphagnum moss under here. I keep it pretty moist over here. But because they're isopods that live in here, and I know they need to do well. The garter snakes burrow under here when they need it, and I feel like, and this side over here I keep much drier by the basking site, and I feel like they do great that way. I don't have problems with shed or anything, so I'm assuming that my humidity is good. So I keep it simple. So Sarah Gendry got one male, one female, who since had another red spotted and a floral blue garter. They all have different personalities, but yours are still the friendliest. Yeah, that's kind of like what I was saying earlier in the stream. I think this species is predisposed to be super friendly, which is one of the reasons I really love this species. Now let's go back. So Clognaw, you sell the babies? I certainly do. If anybody is interested in buying some, you can get on the waiting list. And the waiting list is there's still plenty of spaces on it. I fully anticipate I have at least 20 garters available-ish that aren't spoken for, because I expect to have at least 30 babies this time. So McGee, purchased some Nosotums from you and already have Monkey. Love them so much. Awesome. Glad to hear it. Glad they're doing well. Those Nosotums are an underrated isopod. And Vicabulus. Yeah, I get what you're saying with the varied diet, and that's one of the reasons I offer them earthworms here and there. I think that's really good for them, and I think some variety, they're not real fans of tilapia. Mine aren't. They've eaten it, but they're not really big fans of tilapia. But I think doing things like earthworms, I've thought about Don's garter snakes live pretty close to me, and he says he goes to, I don't know if you have Wingco grocery stores where you live, because stores are kind of regional, but Wingco has frozen frog's legs that I could offer too, as he does that, and it works for him. And there's also a type of thiaminase-free fish he can get there frozen, and he uses those, so I might do some of that as well. Because I do think varied diet is pretty important. Even though mice are fairly complete diet, and I do supplement those too once in a while. I'll put some calcium and vitamin powder on them and stuff. I do think some variety would be beneficial. I agree. And okay, so Vicabulus, yeah, the corn snake. I had to transition the corn snake to the reptilings. I think I had to transition the garters too, just by scenting. I would scent the reptilink with a mouse for a while, and then eventually he took it. What heating works best for garters? Gordo 2.0. They really respond well to a basking light. This light here is just a daytime reptile basking light, kind of a generic one. It heats this to about 90 degrees, which works really well for them because they can absorb the heat from the actual log as well as getting some from above, and it seems to work great for them. That's what I've used. Halogen is supposed to be a really good one for them. And I did just get a halogen dome recently, but I haven't put it on this enclosure. I'm not sure exactly which enclosure I'm going to put it on. And Frank the Tank, thank you for putting the link up to the sexing video for garters. Oh, Random T, yeah, I've heard that sometimes the ball pythons will go for the quail. Hobby Strange Pets, what is the first invertebrates, reptiles, or aquatics you have kept? Well, as a kid, the first reptile I kept was an anole, or anole, however you want to say that. Carolina anole. Anolis carolinensis. Okay, so Mr. and Mrs. Merrily just sent a super chat in. That's awesome. Says, catching this a bit late, your opinion of raising garters alone or in same-sex groups. Would a garter snake be worse off raised all alone? People do it. People raise them all alone. But one thing that I really appreciate that, that Snake Discovery said, and others have said it too, is that garter snakes tend to do better when kept in groups. They actually tend to eat better. They tend to stay calmer, and so on. And though I have not had any direct experience keeping garters alone for any length of time, just for short periods of time, I've done it, but not for a long time. I would say, I can't tell you what it's like on the other end, but I think they do better together based on other things that people have said, and the fact that in the wild, they they're in close association with each other. They actually have buddies. They've done studies where the garters will form bonds with other individuals, and if they are separated for a period of time and then reunited, they will go back to those same group bonds that they had before. So there's something going on there, and that makes me think that garters should be kept together, and they really seem to do well that way. And I raised all the babies that way in groups, and it seemed to be the thing to do. And let's see, what species of isopod do you like to keep with your garters? Right now I'm only using the only bioactive garter enclosure I have is this one at the moment. I think that's going to change fairly soon, but it's Armadillidium klugi Montenegro is in here, and they seem to do well. In fact, I don't want to make too much of a mess, but I think I want to show you since you asked. You can see there's some of them on this piece of cork bark right here. Armadillidium klugi Montenegro. I know the light is crummy, but you can tell what's going on there with the springtails too. Obviously they're thriving in the enclosure as well. So great question, Kim. Thanks for asking. I think some other garters, other isopods that do well with garters, Porcellio dilatatus, Porcellionides pruinosus would be a couple more that you could do with garters. There's others obviously as well. Let's see. There. Did I mostly catch up with the chat? I probably missed a few things, so if there's something I missed, let me know. But thanks again, Mr. and Mrs. Morelia, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Looks like we have a lull in the chat or a glitch. I'm not sure which one. But I was trying to think there was something else I wanted to talk about. It was probably a chat that I missed. Oh, Charlie McLaughlin asked what kind of garters these are. These are Thamnophis, which means bush snake. So all the garter snakes are in the genus Thamnophis, along with ribbon snakes, I believe. So Thamnophis. Sertalis, which means garter, meaning the little thing used to hold up your socks in olden times. And Parietalis, which relates to the word wall, and I think has to do with the pattern here, that there are sharply defined areas between the stripes, the dorsal stripe and the lateral stripe and so on. I believe that's where that comes from. So, like Cabulus. Have you ever used chicks as feeders? I don't think I have. I'm trying to think if I've ever done that. I have not. I've occasionally our chickens would lay, I've never had roosters, just hens, but our chickens would lay what is called a fairy egg, which are very small, and I offered a fairy egg once or twice to our corn snake to see if he was into it, and he was not. And that's about the as close as I've come, I think, to that. So Hobby Strange Pets, pet room tour. I need to do a pet room tour. I was at least going to try to do isopod tours, and I'm still going to do that in honor of 50,000 subscribers. I just need the time to get that kind of video done because it takes an immense amount of time to do it. But I want to do it. Okay, so Dr. Plants. If these do well in a paludarium. I think garters do well in paludaria. I've seen them in paludaria. The main thing is you just need to make sure that they have a very much a moisture gradient in terms of the substrate. They need to have a place where they can completely dry off, which, that's common sense. But that is an issue in some cases, in some paludaria, that there's not a place to dry off for the organisms. And if they're vampire crabs, that's fine. They don't necessarily need a place to be dry. But various other creatures can do fine without that. But a garter snake absolutely needs a place where they can dry off completely, or they will get skin lesions and things like that, and it can cause some pretty serious problems for them. So, and to clarify, the garter snakes would have their own setup. Yes, definitely. I expected that's what you meant, because you wouldn't want to keep them with morning geckos. I think that would end badly for the morning geckos. And I'm sure, I didn't have any doubts that you were going to do their separate setup. But they could do well in paludarium with that one caveat. Oh, and Dope Critters has sent a super chat. So you mentioned your corn snake eating twice a month. At what point should feeding go from weekly to bi-weekly? I think we did that once our snake reached 500 grams. I followed just the normal corn snake thing, and I might be wrong about 500. That's the number that comes to my mind. Maybe it was even less than 500. But when they're essentially done during most of their growing, of course, corn snakes never stop growing entirely. Many reptiles do not. They just keep growing throughout their lives, but there is a point at which they slow down considerably. And our corn snake, when he reached that point, at about 500 grams, I think he's a little over 500 grams, but not much, then that's when you can do it, just start feeding them twice a month. So, and Gordo, yeah, the hobby has changed over 8 years, definitely true. The internet has sped things up. And there's 503. Excellent. And Victor, you're right. Chicken fairy eggs typically only have an egg white and no yolk. And that may have something to do with the lack of interest that our snakes demonstrated. And Dope Critters, thanks again for the super chat, and hopefully that answered your question. 503, welcome. Good to see you here. Better late than never. And Gordo, I actually don't have a Discord group. People have asked me about having a Discord server, but I have not done it. Probably just because I've got so much going on. I don't know that I could even handle that. I don't have the bandwidth for something else, because right now I'm doing YouTube, of course. I do Instagram is the other social medium that I use the most, but it also posts to Facebook and whatnot. Let's see. Holly Strange Pets. Do you have an African bullfrog? Let's do another super chat streak. Sounds pretty awesome to me. Thank you, Javi, for the super chat. African bullfrog, I have never had one. I like them. I think they're really cool. If I were allowed to raise large roaches and I needed something to, help keep the roaches under control, I would probably get an African bullfrog because I think they're awesome. We do have a Pac-Man frog, which is kind of like a small version from a different continent of an African bullfrog. You get a lot of the same characteristics: the huge mouth, the huge appetite, and the sedentary nature. But I like them a lot. Our Pac-Man frog. It's my daughter's. So I don't actually have a Facebook group per se. I just have my Facebook page. I may have said that wrong. So how old are Ruby, Rufus, and Houdini now? Let's see. Okay, they've brewmated twice. So let's see. They brewmated in 2000, across 2021 to 2022. They brewmated in 2020 to 2021, and they did not brewmate in 2020 to 2021. They brewmated the winter before that, which would have been 19 to 20, right? Yeah, 19 to 20. They didn't brewmate, so they've gone through 3 winters, and they were born in August of 20. What would that be? 2019? Did I say that right? August of 2019 is when they were born, I guess. Oh, looks like super chats are building up. Nice. So, Sarah, I think that is how old they are. How old is that? Then that means they're going to be 4 in August? I think so. So, Don, what isopods do you keep in there? I keep Armadillidium klugi Montenegro. And they do drown themselves if I keep the food dish too close to the cork bark. Oh, you can't see it, but one of the snakes just climbed right up onto my iPad that I'm filming this with. Pretty awesome. He does that, actually. They do that. He's curious. He's figuring out what I'm doing and where the food is, most likely. And there we go. So London Jade has a dubia roach buffalo beetle colony going right now, a bioactive. What other feeder insects would do well in the enclosure, if any? Good question. Dubia roach and buffalo beetles. I don't know that I would really add a whole lot more. I haven't worked a lot with roaches. I have never actually kept roaches. I worked with them in an educational capacity before, but not kept them myself. I don't know. I think that sounds pretty good to me. I'd love to share some pictures of my current project I'm working on. Oh, okay. You could probably post to my Facebook page, I think. Is that how that works? I think you could do that. Hobby Strange Pets. Would you recommend Pac-Man frogs for beginner herp keepers? Yes, with some caveats. Basically, You need to make sure you have the proper substrate, and you need to also make sure that you have you're able to maintain temperature. Something that is misunderstood is Pac-Man temperature, Pac-Man frog temperatures. Lower temperatures are pretty detrimental for Pac-Man frogs. So you want to keep the young ones at least 75, maybe 78 up to 82 degrees. And as they get older, they can tolerate a little cooler temperature, and they can tolerate night drops. But daytime temperatures, we're looking at 78, 80 degrees, 76, 75 is, marginal, but you can do that somewhere in there. So I would say that if you can keep that in mind, then yeah, they can work really well. And Mr. and Mrs. Morelli, another super chat. Thank you. Support your work and your baby garters. Appreciate that. I'm going to be buying them a lot of night crawlers to start out with, for sure. Question: how nervous were you with their first brumation? Did you skip their first winter to grow them up? Yes, I skipped the first winter to grow them up. They did not seem particularly interested in needing a brumation that first winter that I had them. They were eating well and everything all winter, so I didn't worry about it. I was pretty nervous, to be honest, that first winter, because I had done things that they can do softer brumations, like our leopard gecko was a very soft brumation at a warmer temperature, and I didn't have to worry about a lot of the logistics that I did with the garter snakes, because I brumate them with a much more complicated process. I do so out in the garage using an ultratherm heater on a thermostat that goes down to really low temperatures, so that I keep the ultratherm heater and the probe temperature at about 50 degrees, which keeps the inside of their brumation chamber in the 40s, and that works great. But I was a little uncomfortable about it because I hadn't done it before. But they came through it just fine, and they did really, really well. They were down from the first week of December until the first week of March, and they did so fantastically well, and that the next winter I was much less worried about it. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question. And yes, to be honest, I was quite nervous that first time. And Gordo, there's a lot of interesting roach and isopod combinations that I've heard of. Some that you should not do, but some that seem to work very well, according to Kyle Candilian. And I've heard, like what some of you are saying, like 503 and Vicabulus, the isopods thrive on the roach frass, which totally makes sense, because roach frass is pretty nutritious. It has a lot of bacteria in it. Isopods love bacteria. Totally works out, which is what basically Kyle said when I interviewed him, which I think is really cool. If I could, I would get some hissers and do some isopod and hisser bins, because they seem to do better. The roaches seem to do better when they're the type of roach that retains the eggs in its body, the ovoviviparous type, until they hatch, rather than ones that produce ootheca that the isopods can possibly eat. Let's see. So pine cones, I would worry, Gordo, a little bit about pine cones, because they have those resins, the aromatic resins in them, which those are things we tend to avoid with isopods and other creatures, because we know that the resins in pine, things like pine chips, pine bedding that people sell in pet stores, not the best thing for them. It can cause respiratory issues, and the resin itself can be sticky and possibly have some toxins in it as well when it's touched. And so I would tend to avoid it. When I was a kid, I would keep rodents on pine bedding because nobody knew at the time that pine bedding was so bad for them. But then later, when I got rats as an adult, we completely avoided pine bedding and cedar bedding, because it has the same sort of issue. So things like aspen bedding are much better for rodents as well as reptiles. So I use aspen bedding for some of my snake enclosures, the ones that aren't bioactive. I'm actually going to do a series of bioactive builds pretty soon. I'm debating on how crazy I'm going to go on the enclosures, whether I'm going to do the whole background thing or not. But I've got a couple of enclosures here that need to be kitted out as bioactives. I do love the bioactive enclosure in terms of look and in terms of the maintenance and just the whole natural feel of it. And Bree, or Bry, you tell me which one it is, sent a super chat. I really appreciate that. Says, what kind of beginner lizard, frog, toad would you recommend for someone looking to control their isopod populations? Okay, well, toads are an excellent option there. Any one of the buffonid toads, depending on where you are and what you can get, can do really well on a diet of mostly isopods, to be honest. You can probably vary it up, and it's probably good for them to vary it up. But if you get, I'm not sure where you're based and what sorts of toads are available to you, but anything in the genus Bufo would do a good job with that. You could probably do something like fire-bellied toads too. Let's see. A Pac-Man frog will eat isopods. So you've got some options there. In terms of lizards, bearded dragons will often eat isopods. They'll munch them up. So there's an option. I have a leopard gecko that has occasionally munched on isopods as well. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. What kind of bedding are you using with this tank? So Victor, this one is the Biodudes Terra Firma with a heavy dose of leaf litter on top. That's what I use in this one, and it seems to work great. I do like the Biodude stuff. I have a couple of enclosures with Biodude substrate in them, and I really like how it works. Can you do a video on your Pac-Man frog setup and care guide? I probably should do that. I always feel like I need a lot of experience before I can do a care guide, and we've only had that Pac-Man frog since October. But once I feel like we have enough experience under our belt, we could do more about that. Fire skinks love isopods. Ooh, yeah. I love the idea of fire skinks. That's so cool. So 503. Yes. Building backgrounds is fun. Just wear gloves or make peace with having glue on your hands forever. Agreed. I am debating. It takes a lot of time, and that's part of the issue. But it is tons of fun. But spray foam on your hands or Gorilla Glue on your hands, huge pain. Very true. Okay, nice. And you're welcome, Bree, or Bry, whichever one it is. I'm sorry that I'm not sure. If you feel comfortable telling me which one, then awesome. And if you don't mind, that's cool too. Whatever works. Excellent. Well, these garters are hungry. And it's almost time to give them their lunch or their dinner or whatever it would be. I think Ruby perked up when she saw me approaching there. I think she smells the food because it's in the room. I didn't make the mistake of putting it on top of their enclosure, because if we were that close, I know that they would be super excited, and I couldn't keep them calm. They'd start trying to eat each other just by accident. But unfortunately, I can't feed. Well, it is frowned upon to feed rodents on video these days because people get upset about it. YouTube gets upset about it, and I can understand why some people get upset about it, but it is part of their natural diet. You know, snakes, including garter snakes, do eat rodents in their natural diet, and they're not alive, but it does upset a lot of people, so I try not to do that on camera. I will feed earthworms on camera sometimes, because people don't seem to get as freaked out about that, even though they're alive. But I don't have my earthworms with me right now, so I don't think I'm going to do that this time, but I will do a feeding with earthworms sometime soon. How's that? I think that would be good if we do that. Yeah, and I always wear gloves when I work with the spray foam, definitely, because it's just not worth the mess. Totally is not. There you go, guys. So Guy Bob, this is an interesting thing. Garter snakes, certain garter snakes, including the red-sided garter snake infernalis, so it's Thamnophis sertalis infernalis, I believe is one of them, will eat certain newts and will sequester the toxins in its body. Therefore it becomes poisonous, one of the few poisonous snakes as opposed to venomous snakes. Garter snakes are also very mildly venomous. According to some accounts, they have a Duvernay's gland, if I pronounced that right, and so they do have toxins that help them to subdue their prey, but those toxins are not an issue for humans. They don't seem to be an issue for humans in general. Potentially a person could be allergic to them or something, but I've been tagged a couple of times by my garters and not had huge issues. It's just not a big deal. But so they can be poisonous if they're eating those newts, and they have a venom of sorts, a very weak venom of sorts. So yeah. And okay, here it is. It says Brianna. So Bree is right. Okay, excellent. And you're the B half of the B&E Patreon team. Excellent. Well, welcome again to Patreon, one of my newest patrons within the past week. So welcome. And let's see. Let's see. Okay. So Kim's, do garters constrict their prey at all? I've never seen it. I've heard garters described as weak constrictors on occasion, but I've never seen them do it at all. And I will say that between the two garter species that I've kept, this is a secret, and I'm telling you because we're at the end of the stream. I have some other garters that I have not revealed on the channel yet, and I'm not going to tell you which species they are yet, but that I've got a reveal coming pretty soon. And this other species of garter is so funny in the way they eat compared to my red-sideds. The red-sideds will sidle right up to the food and they'll grab it, but the way they grab it is much more, I don't know, it's a much more sedate, sort of gentle sort of grabbing. These other garter snakes, they really kind of freak out and sort of strike in the random direction towards the food and don't really pay attention to what they're looking at and saying, oh, I'm just going to strike like 17 times in a row and the off chance I might actually catch the food. It's kind of hilarious to see them do that. They both do it. I have two of them, and they're both doing that whenever they eat. It's nuts. I don't get it. And these garters are a lot more calm about it. And it may just have to do with the fact that the other snakes are not as tame yet. They are captive bred, but they haven't got as much handling. I've actually had them for quite a long time, but they also come from Don's garter snakes. They were in quarantine for a while, fairly long while, and then they went down into brumation, and then I just woke them up in February. So mid-February, and they seem to be doing well. One of them, I finally got him weaned onto eating pinkies because he wasn't doing it. He was an earthworm only snake for a long time, very picky, and so he stayed small. But now that he's on eating pinkies, I'm sure he'll be growing a lot faster. I just had to use minced pinkies mixed with minced earthworms for a few feedings, and then just scented the pinkies, and now he'll just take plain pinkies. So, and Thelso Podcast PH, glad you were able to come. I'm sorry it's so late in the podcast or the live stream that I'm almost done, but glad you're here. Yeah, I prefer frozen thawed. I've never fed my snakes live rodents. I do feed them live earthworms, but I've actually fed them frozen thawed earthworms just to see if that was a thing, and apparently it is, but it's rather messy. But I don't feed live to our corn or our garters. I think the corn snake would probably fare a little bit better against live mice than the garters would, but I just wouldn't risk it. It would be dangerous and not particularly necessary either, because all my snakes have great appetites. And that's the thing. Frozen thawed food can't do any damage to your snake, and so it's just safer. So yes, I agree. Safer, more humane, because then the prey item doesn't need to suffer because it was already dispatched humanely, and so there's just a lot of benefits all around for everybody. So the isopodcast. How do you get rid of mites in your zebra isopods? Because they're infesting my culture. What we have to do is figure out what they're eating. They're getting enough food to proliferate despite the fact that your zebra isopods are in there. One thing I would do is limit your food intake. If you can't have springtails, oh, that's crummy. What region of the world do you live in where you can't get springtails? I'm hoping maybe you can collect some wild and actually introduce them. That might be worth a shot, because springtails really do help. But there's something that the mites are accessing that the zebra isopods are not taking care of adequately fast enough. And that is a very good point, 503 Menagerie. The isopodcast, if you can get predatory mites, they can really help take care of that. I bet you have springtails you could collect in the Philippines, though, the isopodcast. Pretty sure you could. And Mantis God, that is a good tip. You can also use chunks of potato if you can't get the cricket cube food. You can use chunks of potato, put them in there, let them sit overnight, and then pull them out, and you'll be removing some of those. So 503. Yeah, some people shouldn't have reptiles if they are not aware, at least aware of the dangers of feeding live rodents to their reptiles. They probably shouldn't be keeping reptiles. That's true. You need to. Oh no! Push the wrong button. Push the wrong button. Sorry about that. Okay, coming back. Okay, we gotta. Let's see. Yep. So if you're able to get predatory mites from a garden center, it's worth a shot. The ISO podcast. Oh, so the PH is for Philippines. Now I'm putting it together. I often shorten the names, but now I see the significance of the PH there. And isopods, yeah, I wouldn't leave live rodents with any reptile at all, or any other thing that's intended to eat them, because they're going to either eat it or they're going to bite out of self-defense, one or the other. And Gordo, will isopods eat dog kibble? Yeah, in general they will. If you offer it, and some people do very successfully, you just need to make sure you don't offer so much that there's something left for things like mites to eat, because leftover dog food will attract mites, but if you just put enough in there so that your isopods eat it fairly quickly, then it's perfectly fine food. So what I mean is the isopodcast, there might be something, if you're using like green leaf litter, the mites will be attracted to that. If there's leftover food and the isopods aren't finishing the food off you put in there pretty quickly, then they're going to be eating that and attracted to that, and so on. So that's kind of what I mean. Hopefully that's more clear. Who's ready for a 3-hour live stream? Frank, yes, why not? Well, I should probably actually get to editing other videos, but I went overboard a little bit this time, but I hope you don't mind. I enjoyed chatting with you all. Just a preview of next live stream next week. We're going to have the invertebrate dude back. He has been a guest before, and he's coming back to talk to us about some of his amazing things, including his bioluminescent click beetles. He's got some fantastic things going on with that species that he's going to be showing us. He's got a lot of roaches and all sorts of things. So it's going to be a pretty awesome show with Invertebrate Dude. Nice to have him back. And let's see, 503 Menagerie asking about my wife. Is she feeling better? She is feeling a bit better today. Still taking it easy because she's not up to everything, normal life yet. But feeling better than yesterday. So we'll take it, right? She's definitely feeling better, and I'm happy that she is. So I appreciate you checking in. 503 was in the podcast yesterday, or the live stream yesterday with Josh from IsoBuddies. We talked about vernal pool organisms. I just want to say, if you haven't checked out IsoBuddies, he's got some really fun things going on. Last week, my cousin, who is an evolutionary biologist with a focus on entomology, specifically bees and wasps, was a guest on the podcast, and he's had Orrin McMonagle on there, and he's had lots of cool people. Wally from Supreme Gecko. I could just keep going, and if I keep going, I'm going to be on here another 20 minutes. But he's had lots of cool people on there, and Josh is a lot of fun, and has a lot of diverse interests. He keeps isopods, of course. He keeps ants. He's breeding newts right now. I helped him set up his vernal pool and his first vernal setup and this kind of stuff. So yeah, if you didn't check the stream out live, just catch the replay. I think it was fun. I enjoyed doing it, and tried to give out some secrets to how to succeed with vernal pools. And if you haven't subscribed to him, maybe show him some love there, because he talks about a lot of the cool things that we talk about on here. And yeah, so all right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And just remember, if you're interested in baby garters, or you know someone who is, you can contact me and get on the waiting list. I would love to get my garters out to people that I have a connection with. That's the cool thing to do. So, yep. And I totally need to hatch some triops. I think I'm going to hatch some triops this spring. It's been a while since I've done it. I've done it many times, but I need to do it again. So maybe you'll see a vernal pool video on my channel pretty soon. Well, thank you, everybody. Everybody stay healthy, stay safe, and we will catch you on Friday with my newest video.